Hi, this is Cameron Cooper with Hihu, where we take a look back at landmark games of the past and see how they hold up to current industry standards and trends. Today, I'm looking back at Valve's Half-Life 2. Released in 2004, it was one of the first games made with the Source engine. The game received tremendous critical acclaim and is viewed by many as one of the most important games of all time. But 12 years on, does it really live up to the hype? While still a fantastic first-person shooter and cyberpunk romp, the game has lost some of its edge, due primarily to focusing on showcasing the Source engine's abilities rather than creating a coherent gameplay experience. Now, perhaps the first thing noticed about the game is how sleek the physics are. At the time, Source was a pretty advanced engine for handling physics and AI, and in this respect, the game holds up fairly well. Unfortunately, the beauty of the Source engine is also the game's downfall. While other titles made using the Source engine, such as Portal or even Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, would create inventive, interesting puzzles or set pieces, Half-Life 2 instead plays, in some regards, like a tech demo. Rather than this being an interesting game in and of itself, the Half-Life setting and characters are more or less used as a vehicle for Valve to show off the technical specs of their engine. This is most evident when faced with random, mundane, physics-based puzzles. While there are a few interesting ones, they generally fall flat. For example, one part of the game sees the player have to stop their car, hop out, and then operate a crane to move the car to another location, using magnets. While at the time, the scene might have inspired a bit of wonder due to the engine's ability to handle it, by now it just simply feels like a strange and out-of-place piece of gameplay. It really doesn't do anything to teach the player a mechanic that will come in handy throughout the game, nor does it speak to the game's themes in any meaningful way. It just feels like this cumbersome piece of filler. Does this happen all throughout the game? Not at all, but enough for it to be a bit jarring. Speaking of vehicles, the boat and car sequences in the game aren't really what I'd call fun. Does it break up the gunplay? Sure, but without really introducing anything that's particularly interesting. If running down corridors and blasting away Combine feels like a night on the town, then driving the speedboat feels like a day with your lame Hawaiian shirt wearing uncle. But let's break down what really works about Half-Life 2. At its core, this is a meat and potatoes, damn good first-person shooter. Like, damn good. The physics are essentially glitch-free. The AI works fantastically. Well, except for this guy. Additionally, the weapons are nicely balanced, and they all seem to have a place in gameplay, including the gravity gun, which opens up some really cool combat dynamics with the game's physics. Now, while leaning doesn't feature in the vast majority of console-based first-person shooters from the time, such as the Time Splitters series, it does seem strange for a PC game to leave it out, especially since games were doing it by at least 1999, such as System Shock 2. Additionally, although the gameplay is fairly linear, the reuse of assets sometimes makes it possible to get a little bit lost, which could have kind of been remedied by a map or some sort of vague quest marker. Look, one thing about playing old games is it can be quite refreshing not to be handheld, having the game telling you straight up where to go, but it would have been nice to have some sort of small indication as to which generic corridor I'm supposed to run down. Speaking of reused assets, however, this actually brings me to probably the most crucial part of why Half-Life 2 does, ultimately, hold up. That's the lessons that can be learnt by game designers. I've read one or two articles on the subtle brilliance of the pick up that can sequence at the beginning of the game, and I could go into detail here, but that'd be a whole other video. The fact is, things like this scene, as well as the way the developers have managed to make a full and interesting game with really only a handful of enemy types, speaks to some really fantastic choices made in the overall design of the game. If we strip back all the tech demo-y parts that don't really do anything and drop out those filler missions with the vehicles, we end up with a game that does some pretty interesting stuff with what it has. The enemies, locations, puzzles, and the mechanics are repackaged and remixed throughout. This is a perfect example of taking a small set of tools and rearranging them in interesting ways, kind of like playing with Lego. With so much emphasis placed on level design, however, the game starts to lose itself a bit during scripted sequences. A defining trait of the Half-Life franchise is that the player never has control and agency taken away, in a literal sense. No matter what is going on, the player is free to move about and explore the game world. In many cases, it's a fantastic way of allowing the player to feel like they're really part of the narrative. But there are a few moments where it kind of breaks the game. For example, the player completing a certain section relies on the player heeding the warnings from an NPC.
Hold still, Laszlo. Someone's coming. You there! Stop where you are! Stay on the rocks! Don't step on the sand. It makes the antlions crazy. Laszlo, don't move. No. Help!
This is a great bit of gameplay, but if the player, by no real fault of their own, happens to move a bit too fast, because that's what the game has communicated to us we can do, the event becomes broken. The info isn't appropriately relayed to the player, which causes frustration. Perhaps a little bit more polish applied to these sequences would have helped, even if the sacrifice was some of the player's freedom. At the end of the day, these sections function primarily to feed information to the player. I'm not saying we should go all out with cutscenes, but is it really that pivotal that they remain in control just so they can run around shooting things and generally being a tit?
I must say, Gordon, you come at a very...
I'm just so excited to think that we'll finally have a chance to work together. Eli, look who I found in the airlock.
Gordon Freeman. Let me get a look at you, man.
In short, Half-Life 2 is an interesting, dynamic, and overall fun game that had a great deal of thought put behind its design. Elements of it have become bland with time, and it's unlikely that playing it today will conjure the same feelings that picking it up back in 2004 would have. However, if you're a game designer, a critic, or a scholar, it's quite an important game to play, even if to just fill in the gap in your knowledge. Additionally, if you just love first-person shooters and need some new bad dudes to shoot at, it does a pretty damn good job of this as well. The game is currently sitting at around $10 on Steam, and should give you a good, 13 hours or so of gameplay. Now, before we bid farewell to City 17, let us know your thoughts. Are the combat sequences sleek and fast-paced? Or are they a bit too stripped back to really be enjoyable? Do the physics puzzles work and hold up today? Should the game have featured more tightly scripted sequences? Or is the constant control of Gordon Freeman a defining tenet of Half-Life 2? This has been Cameron Cooper with Hihu. Thanks for watching.